Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast, where we look at marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. Information relating to our discussion today and links to the video version can be found on the episode's show notes. You can find them on spacemarketingpodcast.com. Sam Coniglio is a futurist, a technical writer, a photographer, inventor, and private space industry advocate. He is a board member and former vice president of the Space Tourism Society. Since 1999, he has been researching and prototyping off-world domestic concepts to make life easier for the rest of us in space. His zero-gravity cocktail glass concept won international acclaim and reinvents how to drink liquid in a microgravity environment. His cocktail-making drink bots have been showcased on Discovery Channel and the Wall Street Journal. And he is getting ready to come out with a new book, Creature Comforts in Space. And it's about how to make life more comfortable and sustainable for off-world travelers. So let's join us and please welcome Sam Coniglio. Hey, Sam, how are you doing tonight? Well, today.
Doing well. How are you?
Whenever you're listening.
Doing well. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a very interesting biography. So let us hear more about it.
Well, I should probably focus on, I have no idea where to start. Okay, here we go. I guess I'm a technical writer by day and adventurer by night. I'm also a photographer and a frustrated artist and architect. I should have become an architect, but I kind of went in different directions. Became a writer instead. I also have lots of unusual hobbies, most of them related to a certain desert festival and a bunch of mad science projects. My wife, by the way, is a librarian by day, costume designer by night. And my son, he got his first power tool when he was 2.5 years old, grew up around our workshop and is quite comfortable with heavy machinery. Currently, he's 6 years old and obsessed with Legos and Minecraft.
Good thing to be obsessed with.
Yeah, I have lots of stuff. My family, let's just say we kind of ran off and joined the circus, metaphorically.
Let's start off with the zero-G cocktail glass. You got to tell us about what that is.
The cocktail glass was a combination of several research projects, starting with the Space Tourism Society. As you know, I joined it back in the late 1990s. That's when it got started, and was inspired to work with John Spencer of the Space Tourism Society to start designing products to help support his orbital super yachts and orbital cruise ships. One of the things we do at the Space Tourism Society is we don't talk about space hotels, because that thing's like you're grounded in something. If you have a hotel, it's like on a planet or something. But we talk about cruise ships in space, because that's what you're doing. You are cruising around the Earth or around the moon or other places as well. So we use the analogy of cruise ships, which kind of makes more sense because cruise ships are it's a floating spaceship. It's on the water. It's inhospitable. You have to be on this self-contained structure that has all the things you need for living, eating, drinking, working, playing, all that types of stuff. The zero-gravity cocktail glass was just one tiny element of that. And so I started developing concepts of how can we make it easier to eat? How can we make it easier to drink? How can you make it easier to sleep? How can you make it easier to play in a microgravity environment? And no one else was doing this research, so I thought, what the hell? And so I started diving deeper and deeper and understanding the mysteries of zero gravity and what it does to things. And I was fascinated by the ideas of water becomes a blob in space. It's kind of like, soap bubbles, but even more messy. And soap bubbles can be messy, but water becomes this gelatinous blob in zero gravity because there's nothing to keep it flat. There's this thing called surface tension. Surface tension means molecules like to stick to each other. And so without a stronger force, such as gravity forcing it to the ground, it tends to just spherize and just float as one big object. And there's some cool YouTube videos on the internet that the astronauts show how they put objects inside little blobs of water. And there's a GoPro camera that's floating in this blob. And there's a video of astronaut Chris Hadfield when he's like squeezing a washcloth, and all of a sudden he's trying to get the water out of the washcloth, and what it does, it starts floating around the washcloth and then starts glomming over his hand like slime, like that. So I call it blob management. And so what I had to do was design a glass that can control that blob and keep it in a reasonable place. I was fascinated by the research by Dr. Donald Pettit, who's an astronaut, who did lots of research on liquids and how they work in the microgravity environment. And he invented the zero gravity coffee cup. Quite an amazing thing. And all it was a teardrop shaped object. And the liquid likes to stick at that V, that little V point where two surfaces connect. And so it likes to collect in that area there, not in the round part, but in that little bit there. And so he invented a coffee cup where you can literally don't need a lid. It's not going to float away. It likes to stick to things. The liquid likes to stick to a surface. That's why, like, if you took a bottle of your favorite drink and you brought it up there, the liquid will stay inside. It doesn't want to leave because it's sticking to the surface. That's another feature of surface tension. It likes to stick to things. And so you have to redesign the entire drinking vessel. So the zero gravity coffee cup was one of the first, actually it was the first patented invention in space that it could only be done in space to manage fluids. And you can make drinks out of it, or drinking vessels out of it. So I took that idea to the next level, where I invented a thing called a zero gravity cocktail glass, where I have a whole series of these tiny ridges like this, where you can bring the liquids in. I inject the fluids through the bottom of the glass. It looks like a typical martini glass, but there's an actual, it's a hollow stem, and at the bottom there's a one-way duckbill valve where you inject the fluids in. I also designed robots that serve cocktails, so I had to figure out the machinery to get that stuff injected in. And then it's going through the central tube to the glass bowl itself. And in the bowl is a whole series of these little V's. And we artistically designed it in a manner so all the V's were focused at one point. So you may have a nice round martini glass, but only one point is where you truly drink from it and sip from it and not have to worry about everything just splashing all over the place.
Well, and let's move on to the cocktail making drink bots that you just alluded to. So tell us about that.
So it was not directly associated with the Space Tourism Society, but it was a fun hobby. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and for many, many years, it was an amazing coalition. It was kind of like this juxtaposition of extreme art and science and engineering and technology. What do engineers do in their spare time? What do artists do for fun? And so all of a sudden, I'm interacting with people who are artists and engineers and creative people working together. So the artist has the grand vision and the beautiful stuff, and then they work with the engineers to actually build the thing. And so I worked with engineers. I was the idea guy. I would like conceive of these things, but I was like, I have no idea how to build it. So I work with the engineers and the makers and other artists to conceive of these things, such as the Cosmobot, which was a rocket ship shaped robot. And the idea was that a customer would come up to the machine, and there's a control panel at the bottom, and you turn a dial to choose the drink you want, and you push a big red shiny button. And that big red, and just like every favorite science fiction movie, you have a big red shiny button. You push the button, 3, 2, 1, launch, and then there's this whole pressurization sequence, and lights turn on. You see the fuel tanks are the vodka, the triple sec cranberry and lime juice being pressurized, and then the pump would pump it out into just the right amount, because you can only have a certain amount, because the way cocktails work is proportionality. You can't have too much of any one thing, or else the flavor goes bad. All vodka drink. Some people may like it, but I like flavor. So we have to mix it like a proper cocktail, and then those different ingredients go into a chamber where we put dry ice to chill the drink very quickly. And after a few seconds, it dispenses it out of the rocket nozzle. So it's the flame of the rocket, quote unquote, exhausting out of the bottom of the rocket into the glass. So the whole contraption looks like a 1950s style rocket ship with a 3 landing gear, and there's one big nozzle engine at the bottom, and has this funny little, rocket shaped, tube shaped thing. It was a very fun contraption, and that was our first built robot we built. The second one I built for my wife. I worked together with her because we're very much into this thing called steampunk, which is a very much an envisioning, a retro-futurist envisioning of the future through the eyes of Victoriana, Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, folks like that. And so We had a 1928 coffee percolator, beautiful, silver-plated, gorgeous details on that. And we converted it into a hot water boiler. And at the bottom, we had these solenoid valves that can turn on and off automatically through electronics. And we used a little Arduino microprocessor to do the controlling. By the way, this is all computer controlled, but no one sees it. It's closer to more like Disney. If you go to Disney, you see all the animatronic characters. You don't see the electronics. You see the beautiful creatures. That's what's going on here with the drink bots. We hide the technology around this incredible facade. So with the T engine, we took an old rotary dial phone, the old, turned it out and turned it back, and you dial 2 for tea, and you just simply get hot tea water. You dial 4 for tea and cream, and then we have a creamer container over here, and a sugar dispenser over here. It's actually like simple syrup, and so there's a valve attached to those, and you dial 2, and you'll get a little cream and hot water, and then if you dial 2, 4, 6, you get tea, cream, and sugar just by dialing this rotary dial. And the fascinating thing about user interfaces, I love user interfaces, it was quite an adventure about that, is that people of a certain age, children, folks under the age of 30, have never seen a rotary dial phone. They had
don't
no
even
idea
know how to use it.
They don't know what to do with the thing. So we had instructions to explain how you just put your finger in the top and go to that thing that stops, let go, and it does its work. All run through Arduino and solenoid valves. We boil the hot water, and so we put fine china cups in there, and it was like pinkies up, fine, elegant cup of tea, ready to go. That was our second robot. Our third robot, which was like our biggest one of all, was Tiki-tron. So I'm very much into the whole tiki cocktail lifestyle, the faux Hawaiian Polynesian mythology the Americans made up about the Pacific Isles, with very fancy huts and made of bamboo and thatch, and really dangerous cocktails, very powerful, sweet cocktails. So the Tiki-tron plays with that mythology, so that we have what looks like your classic science, your high school mad science project with a volcano that explodes, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a volcano. It's about 3 feet tall, and has the eyes that glow, and there's a big cave in the bottom, and that's where you put your glass in. And next to the volcano is a tiki hut, and in the hut there's about a dozen bottles of different types of alcohols, liqueurs, mixers, and things like that, and a whole series of peristaltic pumps. My favorite pumps in the world, by the way. I'll explain that later. And then there are these idols. Imagine these little wooden figurines you would pick up at a tacky, cheesy souvenir shop in Hawaii that has the different, tiki god shapes. It's all fake and all silly, but it just represents these different characters. And so each idol is assigned to a drink, like a Mai Tai, or lapu lapu, or all sorts of Polynesian cocktails. And you choose, and we have some non-alcoholic ones in there too, believe it or not. And you choose the idol. There's a sensor at the bottom. Most people don't notice there's a sensor at the bottom, an RFID chip. And so what happens is that I create a whole spectacle show, and I wear fancy outfits and all that. And I teach people how they have to pay homage to the great volcano god, Tiki-tron. You take the idol, you drop it into the top of the volcano, and it drops. And then all of a sudden you hear a scream. We have speaker system here. So we have screams. I actually have a different scream per drink, by the way. It's great. Lots of friends were involved with this project. There's a scream. Then you hear the tribal drums. The eyes of the volcano light up. The cave lights up. The drink is getting dispensed into the glass. And at the same time, there's all this tribal dance music going on. And I'm encouraging everyone to dance. Dance for your drink. Dance for your drink. Because as you dance, it makes the drink taste better. You've appeased the tiki god.
And, the thing is that a lot of space tourism is about the experience. It is completely about the experience. And this is definitely what you're bringing, is the experience. It's not just a drink. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, so the Space Tourism Society is founded on the concept of the experience economy. There's a book called The Experience Economy. And the idea is people will pay lots of money for having a unique experience. For example, climbing Mount Everest, or traveling to Antarctica, or going on an African safari, or going on like an eco tour trip, or some people pay money just to go to a farm to pretend what it's like to see what it's like to be a farmer for a day,
Yes.
or to pick your own fruits and vegetables. Go to the farm and pick your fruits and vegetables. People will pay money to do these things, take these unusual tours, or have an unusual experience. A very popular thing in the space world right now is the analog astronaut program,
Mm-hmm.
where
Yes.
people will go to Hawaii, Spain, and a few other places where they have these remote areas. The Mars Society was famous for this. They would have I think it was Mars Institute. They would have a place in northern Canada, a remote area, where you would spend weeks or months cooped up in these tents, in these structures, pretending to be an astronaut, pretending to be a space explorer, and you would put on these like spacesuits, modified spacesuits, to walk around and do science and exploration. People pay money to do that. People want to have
Yes.
that adventure of like, I am totally out of my comfort zone. I'm in this strange place. I'm with all these strange people, but we're doing it for science and fun.
Yes. Because there is science that goes on at those. Yes. And for example, the one in Hawaii, apparently, because of all the volcanic ash, it is like, they have moon ones and they have Mars ones. And it is, there's some in Poland. There's even one underwater. So, that so that you can have the microgravity effect experience as well in the water. So
Yeah, that's off the coast of Florida. And did you know about Jacques Cousteau? He had three underwater, not cities, but he had like these underwater facilities back in the
no,
1960s.
I
Yeah,
did not
Jacques
know that.
Cousteau, it was interesting parallels. Like during the height of the space race in the 1960s, they were heading towards the moon. There are folks that are pioneering deep sea diving and deep sea exploration. And Jacques Cousteau was one of the pioneers. I mean, he invented the scuba dive system that we use, the aqualung system. And he was getting financing from various organizations to do deep exploration and document it in film and, commercials, TV shows, stuff like that. And he got the funding to build these underwater facilities to do research and just live out there.
Because it's its own space as well. I mean,
Exactly.
it's not as harsh as in space itself, but it definitely has a lot of similarities.
Depends on who you talk to. For many people, they think that it's harder to be underwater because the pressures are immense. The deeper you go, the greater the pressure. In space, it's a negative pressure, but it's not as extreme in the opposite direction as it is going underwater. So, in some ways, underwater exploration is more dangerous in some ways.
Well, they're both hard, that's for sure.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's go into a different subject. I've got to know, what is a futurist? I've seen this as a title for several things, and I've looked it up, and there's a school, but that's about as far as I know what it is. So tell us what a futurist is. It's an actual title.
Yeah, people play with that title quite a bit. John Spencer calls us all futurists because the mere fact that we're even talking about this subject means that we are thinking forward. We're thinking about what the next thing's going to be. Um, I kind of like to think myself as a retro futurist,
Okay.
someone
Yes.
who researches elements of the past and the present to define a possible future. For example, I've been actively involved with these three different communities: the Burning Man community, the steampunk community, and the maker communities. The Burning Man community for combining off the grid survival with extreme creativity out in the desert. Steampunk for its reinterpretation of 19th century Victorian concepts. And makers for the encouragement of creativity and invention. Similar to what we call, this is where STEM and STEAM concepts appear in education. It all started with the maker movement and the maker fairs. All of these communities actively encourage play. And from play, random ideas collide and create new ideas. So that's why I can kind of consider myself more of a retro futurist.
That's a good one. It's a good one. So tell us a little bit about the Space Tourism Society that you were a part of.
So the Space Tourism Society is a nonprofit organization that researches and promotes the potential of off-world living and adventure. We model ourselves closely to the concept of the experience economy. I mentioned this earlier, where people will pay for unique, life-changing experiences. The society was founded by John Spencer back in 1996 or so. He's a space architect who's worked on some very early space station concept back in the 90s. He's also a consultant for Hollywood movies and TV shows whenever they're designing off-world living situations. So they talk to him. STS, the Space Tourism Society, views space tourism from 5 different levels of experience. I'll try to be brief. These 5 levels. Number 1, ground-based activities such as going to a space museum, playing in virtual reality simulations, or playing video games. Anybody can do that. It's reasonable price. We can do that. Level 2 is immersive simulations, such as we talked about with analog astronaut programs, or space camps, or any place where you are committed to be involved with some type of space-like activity, but still on the ground, and still, reasonably priced. Level 3, flying in parabolic aircraft, such as the ones by Zero G Corporation. There, it's a little bit more of an investment, and you're getting really serious about experiencing weightlessness, seeing what it's like to just float around, or have 1/6G or 1/3 G. Level 4, suborbital flights to the edge of space, such as Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin. And then level 5, the ultimate level, actually flying into space, like through companies Space Adventures or SpaceX.
Yes, which we have Polaris is actually getting ready to take off on in March, and they're going to be going to the very edge and doing a spacewalk. So that's going to be exciting.
Exactly. What they're doing with Polaris Dawn is an awesome pioneering feat. They are pushing the limit of what's the next thing we can do. Okay, we made it space. Great. We had a big dome in our spacecraft. That's awesome. What's the next thing we can do? What's the next thing we can do? So I love what they're doing. They're pushing the envelope. See, how much further can we go? How much further can we go? That is great pioneering work in the realm of space tourism.
And Dear Moon by the end of the year.
And Dear Moon, very interesting having all these creative people in one place in space.
Yes.
There have been a number of occasions where astronauts have suggested that artists and poets should go to space so they can convey in their language, the language of art, what it's like to be off-world. There's a concept called the overview effect. I'm sure you're familiar with it,
yes.
Where the experience of you see the edge of the horizon, you see the thin atmosphere that protects us from micrometeorites and radiation and all sorts of scary stuff, and you're in awe of this entire universe right there. It's an amazing effect. And so many astronauts have been transformed by that, absolutely. But if you bring creative people like what we're talking here with Dear Moon, it should take it to the next level. When those people come back from their trip, they will be different.
Yes, absolutely. And they're going to be able to share that with us in a way that the astronauts do their best, but, they're going to be able to share the emotion through art and music and photography and all of that. And it's just I am very excited about that. And you have Artemis 2 going on at the same time. We're getting ready to see a huge transformation, especially in the area of tourism, in space in general. Just the excitement level is getting ready to get amped up to the next level. So
it's quite surprising. It is quite amazing. All these years, I've been waiting for 20, 30 years for this moment. And we're finally at that point. Finally.
Yes. Well, yeah. It's just, oh, man, when I was 13 years old, I read some science fiction. My grandparents turned me on to science fiction, and I wanted to be a colonist on a planet. That was what I wanted to do. And at that time, that wasn't a possibility. But, it may still not be a possibility, but it's getting closer. And
it's getting closer.
It's getting closer. Hold on to your boosters. We will be right back with guest Sam Coniglio and talk about creature comforts in space after a brief message from our sponsors. All right. So what has drawn you to developing these off-world domestic concepts? You go pretty deep into it, from everything from, a cocktail to how a toilet works. Yes?
Yes. Talking about the things that most people don't want to talk about, but it needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
needs to be done.
it needs to be done, exactly. But how can we make it better?
Marketing
So
strategies related to
the
our
reason I
guest
started getting into
visit
this
can be
stuff was,
found on
I was frustrated
spacemarketingpodcast.com
by
in
the
the
lack of interest
Show
by
Notes
space experts on
Expanded
the human
section
side of
with
living in
corresponding
space.
page
I
numbers
cannot
to the
tell you how
strategies
many
in my book,
conferences I
Space
went to
Marketing
and all
Competing
the
in the New
sessions I
Space
attended
Economy,
where they
available
talked
on
about
Amazon and
gutter
Audible.
rockets and creating
Stay
satellites
tuned,
and
and
tinkering
we'll
with
be right
robots and
back.
business models. But almost none of them were talking about how to make life better, how to improve life support, improving health and safety of the people up there, entertainment, talking about what happens when you're up there for months or years at a time. No one was discussing these issues. And I think they are critical. And for decades, I mean, it wasn't practical for most folks because we were struggling just to get anything off the ground. We were reliant on NASA, one organization, to do everything. The politics and the mindset of the day for many years was like, if it was not invented by NASA, it can't exist. It can't work. It won't happen. So I started getting involved with space activist organizations like the Space Tourism Society, Space Frontier Foundation, National Space Society, the whole gamut of groups to find out what I can do, find out what's going on.
Okay, and you wrote a book about that. You want to tell us a little bit about your book, Creature Comforts in Space? That's getting close.
We're getting really close, like 95, 98% there, so close.
Writing a book
Writing
is
is hard,
hard. Yeah, I just
hard.
did my second one. Yes, it's hard.
Oh, what's your second book? What's your second book?
It is Space Marketing Spaceports, and it's getting ready to launch. And, there's nothing like a timeline. I'm going to be speaking at SpaceCom and at the Spaceport Summit, and they want to give out my book there. So they were like, let's have it.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Congratulations. That's great.
So, yeah, it's
So,
exciting. So tell us about yours.
so Creature Comforts in Space is kind of a culmination of all my years of research and experimentation and tinkering with projects. I wanted to not only lay out, I wanted to lay out all the various challenges of living in space because not everyone understands all that. And I also wanted to propose a wide variety of domestic concepts to reduce labor and increase enjoyment while living on a space station or a space hotel or space cruise ship for long periods of time. I also discovered along the way that by dealing with the constraints of the limited resources in space, many of the concepts I developed can also apply to Earth and
Yes,
sustainability. It was like, hey,
absolutely.
if you can recycle everything from a toilet, maybe you can also apply that to Earth as well. Wastewater gardening is one example. When you're working with extremely limited amounts of water and other resources, you need to find ways to be super efficient. That's why I think this book will be very interesting to the general public because it makes you think about very common everyday things in a totally different way.
Luke talked a little bit about the Space Tourism Society, but the Space Tourism Society has a conference, and that's a big part of why we're talking today is because last year we met for the first time, and I gotta tell you, I had the most fun I've ever had at a conference there. I could not believe I was talked out by the time I left. I could not believe how many awesome synergistic conversations I had that trip. So we're getting ready to have it again, and you will be leading a food and drink off-world go to Grub and Galactic Gourmet session. So I know it's still a little bit out, but what are some of the ideas that you have about the session?
Well, the title kind of says it all. I can't claim credit. Someone else made that name, but it still works. Um, this session will be a gathering of fellow visionaries and space experts who have been dealing with various aspects of food and drink off-world. And so it's going to be great to be like a meeting of minds of a very unusual topic about food and drink in space. Very few people are even discussing this idea of reinventing food, reinventing cooking, reinventing drinking, reinventing packaging, reinventing the whole aspect of reusability. And, do you need a dishwasher in space? Do you need a composter? Do you have robots that cook your meals? Can we use the Star Trek replicator as our role model, as the ultimate cooking machine, where I can say tea, Earl Grey hot, and boom, there it is, it just shows up.
There you go. Yeah.
Believe it or not, those concepts are here. Robotic restaurants exist today. Robotic drink machines exist today. The ones I built were just for fun, but there are several companies out there that are actually doing it as a business model, making money creating these machines, or where you can talk to it, or you program it on your phone. You can order a drink or order a meal, and the machine does the thing, and there it is. They're not perfect. There's still a lot of errors with it, but these concepts are building. What's going to be fascinating to me is to hear discussions about these companies that are basically growing meat cells in vats or or plant matter in vats, and can literally generate a hamburger-like substance. It's meat cells, but they can actually, grow it and splorp it on a plate, and there you go. You have the burger, but then you cook it, of course. And then also reinventing ovens and cooking systems. And so I got ideas such as they called it, one of the names is George Foreman grill, but basically it's a 2-layer grill, metal plates go on top, heat the bottom, because you have to physically contact the food to heat it up. If you have a distance behind it, the heat doesn't go where you want it to go. So you have this
It's
plus
not the
convection
same.
currents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the
Zero
same in
gravity,
space.
convection currents do not exist. And without convection currents, pretty much all of the appliances we use on Earth will not work, period. Convection currents need to be rebuilt or reinvented or replaced by something else to cook the food, to freeze the food, to store the food, to prepare the food. All sorts of stuff that we never thought of before. We have to reinvent food.
Well, and even microwaves. I believe that there's no microwave on the International Space Station because it interferes with scientific equipment.
The
So,
radiation disrupts other equipment. They're very sensitive equipment up there, and having microwaves beaming out in all directions, it's shielded but not perfectly shielded. So you have to be really careful about microwaves interrupting other equipment. Maybe in the future we could have something like that out there, but we have to test it out. And that's the
right.
challenge with all the stuff I'm talking about, is that we have not had the opportunity to test many of these concepts in space. Even the parabolic flights with zero G, you get 30 seconds.
Right.
It's not that
Every
much.
yeah, every
And
90 seconds or something like that.
it's a very, very short amount of time to learn what zero G is like. And now we're learning it through the International Space Station, and astronauts and cosmonauts living out there for very long periods of time. They're experiencing changes to their bodies. The
Yes.
osteoporosis effect, because the muscles are deteriorating. The bones are deteriorating. Your head's getting fluffy. I'm sorry. Your head is puffing up with fluid because we're no longer fighting gravity. The fluids in your body are being redistributed up to your head and to your arms and other body parts. Your legs are kind of useless. They're irrelevant in space. I've been telling people that you could be just disabled and be perfectly fine up there, because legs are irrelevant. You don't need them up there. And what's happening is your body is trying to adapt. The human body is amazing. We've learned how to adapt to live in mountains and in the deserts and in the swamps and in underwater. It's amazing, all the places, all the environments we've adapted to. But space is the new frontier for the human body. And so what's been happening is that the human body is trying to figure out, well, what do I do in zero gravity? Oh, let's start, get rid of this body part, and you focus on this body part. It's nature. The longer you're up there, your body will transform. You will become the space alien.
Right. Right. I mean, our bodies, like you said, they adapt. So, is there any final thoughts? What do you want people to walk away with as they go about their day to day after hearing all this? What do you want them to leave them with?
Well, think about this. Space tourism is not just about rich people going up. Space tourism and the infrastructure around building the entertainment and the experiences up there will stay. And that infrastructure is what needed to build long-term life up there. To build that infrastructure, we have to learn, or basically reinvent, the way we live. And the things that we design and build for space, we can bring back to Earth to live more efficiently with nature, because it's far more efficient than the way we are living with nature right now. And we're paying the price for that.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's continuing to get, I believe the solution is in space. We create little ecosystems up there, and what we learn in that ecosystem, we can save our ecosystem down here.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can people get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is through my LinkedIn account.
Love
Um,
LinkedIn. Yes.
yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best way of reaching me, and then you can contact me and we can talk shop. Spaceman Sam is my name on LinkedIn, or just look for Samuel Coniglio up there. You'll find me. And yeah, I've been talking about the book up there and interacting with my space friends. And of course, come to the Space Tourism Conference, April 28th, 2023. You'll meet some amazing, eclectic people, scientists, engineers, artists, food designers, chefs, our space architects will be there. People who are reinventing the way we live off world, they will be there talking about those details.
Oh, and like I said, it's the most stimulating conversation I think I've ever had. And I can't wait to go back. So, well, thank you so much for spending time with us. And I can't wait to see you.
All right, I can't wait to see you too.
Please subscribe before you head on over to my YouTube channel for bonus footage. Links to the YouTube and other social media channels can be found on spacemarketingpodcast.com. A special thanks to Sam Coniglio for joining us today and sharing his journey to space. Be sure to check out his links listed in today's show notes. I hope that you have found this podcast useful for your journey as you reach for the stars.